Welcome to Motivational Interviewing, a tool for communication and promoting change, our second podcast in our mentor training series. I'm Lucy Bossert, Health and Wellness Program Coordinator at Boulder Options.
And I'm Sarah Schaefer, the Program Manager. We hope before you got to this training you were able to read the document from UMass that explains what motivational interviewing is, because it explores and describes all of the concepts that we're going to talk about here today, and it provides a really useful tool for following along.
All right, so what is motivational interviewing? So it's defined as a collaborative, person-centered form of guiding to elicit and strengthen motivation for change. And that's a mouthful. But the key features of motivational interviewing are exploring and resolving ambivalence, focusing on motivating an individual to make a change through their own volition, and not using coercion or external motivators to bring about change.
So Lucy, this is really about trying to figure out what the youth wants to do and a way that you can help them do it. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
So why does Boulder Options promote motivational interviewing? Well, it's a really great way to figure out what goals you and your mentee should work on together during your year together. It also makes sure that all of the goals are really youth-centered. And that's something that really improves the success rate for all matches in a year, is making sure that whatever you're working on is really driven by the youth, because it gives them a feeling of value and purpose. It also is a great way to develop rapport surrounding issues that might be really hard to discuss with youth, especially because changing behaviors or adopting new ways of being are sometimes really difficult and can make a youth feel bad or weird. And lastly, it's also a proven tool for promoting behavior change in a positive manner with, again, not having to coerce, bribe, or impose your own idea of what a behavior change should be for the mentor.
And finally, behavior change is just really scary. So I just like to think of behaviors that have changed in my life and how I felt initially. If someone had coerced, bribed, or thought of that change for me, I don't think I would have felt very good.
Lucy, what's something that you changed your behavior with?
Eating kale.
Ooh, vegetables.
Yeah.
Did anyone ever try to bribe or coerce you into eating them?
Definitely. I feel like kale is everywhere in our society. Little shirts that say "eat more kale," and then everybody's making kale chips and putting kale in everything. Kind of felt a little bit coerced.
So did your mom try to make you eat it as a kid?
Yeah, but then she made kale chips, and I actually really kind of liked them.
So when you were forced to eat kale, you might not have liked it, but once you found out a way that you wanted to eat it, you were down.
Yeah. Yep. So moving on to the intention behind using motivational interviewing. We want to make sure that motivational interviewing is used for the right purpose in your relationship with your mentee. So what it is intended to promote is things like healthy habits and lifestyle changes, such as maybe eating more fruits and vegetables or drinking more water, things like physical activity and academic progress. Motivational interviewing should be used to help the youth figure out what they'd like to change, not to force a change upon them.
Mm-hmm. So it might inspire more of a conversation with the youth instead of coming into a relationship already having an idea of what you want them to change.
Mm-hmm. And it's something that you can suggest things and provide examples, but ultimately the idea needs to come from the youth.
Mm-hmm. So things motivational interviewing is not intended to promote is weight loss. We're a body-positive organization here at Boulder Options, and as you probably remember from the presentation on adolescent development, these are really formative years for self-esteem and self-confidence. And we want kids to know that every body is a good body, and instead of correlating health with weight, we all need to equate health with strength, endurance, and mental well-being. It's also not intended to treat, diagnose, or identify health issues, including mental, emotional, or physical, because we're just not doctors, and we're definitely not the youth's healthcare provider. And if you are, maybe you should contact us. We also don't want this to be intended to coerce the youth to doing what you want to do. Again, it is very youth-focused.
So motivational interviewing is a tool in your toolbox. It's a tool that, as you work with your mentee to set goals and work towards them, it's a skill that also takes time and practice to develop. That document that we had at the beginning of this podcast is quite long, and so going through those steps and really making sure that you're doing it right takes some time to develop. So after reading through that, it does seem pretty straightforward, but it does take time. So It helps to start small in order to work towards something larger with this. Maybe just start by asking your mentee open-ended questions. Or pick a topic, something that doesn't have to do with making a behavior change, and try to discuss it in depth with your mentee. So think of questions that do more than scratch the surface. So instead of asking, do you like kale? You could say, how do you feel about kale? Or what was an experience that you had with kale and how did it make you feel?
So it becomes more of a story.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a great way to look towards working on basic behavior changes, something like drinking 1 more bottle of water per day. And a way this might come about is perhaps you're going on a run with your youth, and your youth is talking about feeling like they have a side ache and they're really tired, and maybe they're super hot and they're just not sweating enough. All signs that you know are dehydration. And it would be really easy to say, Lucy, you need to drink more water.
Oh, I don't really like water.
And then it becomes more of an issue with the youth and not something that the youth necessarily wants to change. So we're going to keep revisiting this example in the rest of this presentation so you can see how this might be changed with the use of motivational interviewing.
So if you're looking to help motivate your mentee to make a change, it's good to understand if they're actually ready to make that change. And this is figured out through looking at the stages of change and how those relate to motivational interviewing. So listed below are all of the 6 stages of change. And it's important to understand the stages of change and determine what a stage a person is in order to help problem solve through resistance. So if you're having difficulty setting a goal or working towards a goal, listening to the language that your youth is using and what they're saying during conversations can be a hint as to where they might be in the stages of change. So the first stage of change is pre-contemplation. And someone in pre-contemplation is not aware that they have a behavior that needs to change, or they have no intention of changing. So in our example with the dehydration, your mentee might not necessarily know that they need to be drinking water.
I might say something like, I actually don't want to drink water, and I only really like to drink pop.
So saying things that they don't want to make a change, or they've changed the subject entirely. Maybe I ask Sarah, well, what would make you drink more water?
Can we go to the store after this?
So totally changing the subject.
The next stage that your youth might be in is the contemplation stage. And this might be something where after an in-depth conversation with your youth may be ready to have. And language that they might be using is something like, I'd like to do that, but I don't know how to change. An example with the water is the youth might say, I'd really like to not get stomach cramps when we run, but I don't really know how to change that behavior. Or, I think I know that water will help me, but I don't know that I want to hold a water bottle with me while we're running, and I don't understand how I could change that behavior.
So just making sure that when you're talking to your youth about these things, that you're asking questions without passing judgment. So the next stage of change is preparation. And someone in this stage acknowledges that they need to make a change and they believe that they can. So your mentee might have gotten a water bottle at a Boulder Options event last week, and they might come up to you and be like, I think I'm going to start bringing my water bottle with me to school and filling it up at the water fountain. Do you think that's a good idea? All right.
The next stage is action. This is the really fun stage. And this is language that often tells you that the person is going to do something and has done it. And that could be the youth coming to you and saying, look, I got my water bottle. Or I used to drink only pop, and now I'm going to try to drink at least 2 water bottles a day.
The 5th stage of change is maintenance. So this is when a person has made a change and has kept it up over time. So your mentee might be saying something like, I've been bringing my water bottle to school every single day for the past school year, and I really feel good. I haven't gotten any side aches.
And maintenance can be done by the youth, and it can also be done by you. You might hear this in conversation with your other friends when somebody has said something they want to change, and you say, I did this and it really helped me too. So with water bottle, you could say, I put a sticker on my water bottle, and then every time I see it, I get happy, so I always want to have it around me. The last stage of motivational interviewing is either termination or adoption of the new habit. Sometimes the language that you could hear are, these things I do are just who I am now. I always have a water bottle around me, and I can't really imagine not having that anymore. Or it might be, I'm so happy I made the change from drinking pop to drinking water. This is a great sign because it means that the youth may have these habits for a long time. However, another stage, the similar part of the stage would be the termination stage, and this is often called relapse. So sometimes these changes stick for a little bit, and then sometimes the people fall back into their old ways, even cycling back into pre-contemplation. And something to remember here is that even if your youth falls back into the pre-contemplation stage, we need to go back from the beginning, really keep it youth-centered. Even if you feel like this is a change they should have kept up with, we want to keep it as youth-centered as possible and meet them where they're at.
All right. So things to look back on now that you've learned a little bit about motivational interviewing. It's time to reflect. So some things to ask yourself. How do you foresee using motivational interviewing with your mentee?
How could you use motivational interviewing in setting goals with your mentee?
What are ways I shouldn't be using motivational interviewing with my mentee?
And how can I use the skills of motivational interviewing in my everyday communications? Our next training is going to be all about communication, and we're going to touch a little bit on motivational interviewing in that too.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you back at the next podcast.